welcome to the latest episode. Dave here, Alex here. Ruthi is handling some family stuff, so you're stuck with the two of us this week. Alex, you had some good ideas for what you wanted this show to be about, so why don't you kick us off?
Sure. So some of the topic ideas came from Ruthi, so throw some credit there. Basically, had a couple different sets of questions, so we'll kind of kick off with the first one, and we'll kind of transition over to the next one as we get through it. So, enterprise crawling. So that's a pretty massive topic and one for any enterprise SEO. You got to kind of wrangle with that of, is Screaming Frog not enough? Basically, that's usually the first question that kind of comes to mind. Right. But a couple things with that. So one, what are the common issues that you basically have with crawling at an enterprise scale? And then the second one is when to move to an enterprise crawler. So I can give a kind of quick opinion about it from at least the first one, but love to hear kind of what the issues you've seen, problems that you've kind of encountered over different clients and the like, and then as well as what did you see from tools, or what did you see that was a value that you really thought that this is something that resonated with maybe the kind of internal teams or the internal leaders. And what really got them interested in it. So one thing, go ahead. Kick off?
No, go. I'm
right.
Still thinking, so.
Sure. Yeah, so some of the things that I've run into basically from the kind of common issues with enterprise crawling is one, really messy websites. And that can be technical problems, flukes, odd things that are just a part of the site. For instance, hey, we've got a whole giant gallery of videos and they're just not crawled or not crawlable or something like that. And it's a main money maker or subscription model or something like that. And we're just losing that in our data. It just doesn't show up. So then you have to figure out, okay, how can I tweak things to basically make it work? And eventually you're tweaking so much, it's taking a lot of time. The other thing is like the enterprise crawler tools that are out there, they kind of remind me a lot of like Google Analytics. You click around, the data's there, the charts are there, the graphics are easy to pull, the dashboards automatically email. A lot of stuff integrates with it. It kind of becomes almost a home for you, and given that pulls in analytics data, pulls in Google Search Console data, pulls in all these other kind of sources of data, becomes this main piece that you kind of use versus Screaming Frog, while it has some API connections, isn't still that yet. It's still a lot of data. Not too much in charts, and it takes a lot of processing yourself to turn it into something that's like PowerPoint friendly. So some of the difficulties, though, I definitely see is pricing. I mean, honestly, good God, the cost of some of those tools is just astounding. So it's such a gap in the market that I see between like we have Screaming Frog and then we have like Spotify, and there's a couple other tools that have recently kind of renamed themselves, but enterprise crawler tools, and the cost difference is within a couple of $100 to tens of thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars, which is where kind of those next ones even start.
Right. There's
this big gap in the middle that's for $1,500 you can't get anything. There isn't really a good middle ground mid-size. So you're either between scrappy and my gosh, that's a massive contract that's going to take us 6-9 months to get my leadership on board to even fund the thing.
Right. Yeah, there is that weird spot, to your point of either the pricing is totally for enterprise where they're adding a couple points on the margin, just because you can, right?
Boat payments.
Exactly.
And, EU tax. Wait, what?
Yeah, exactly. That being said, all of our friends in the tool companies, we kid out of love. Because I don't begrudge that sales model. But the creator side too, because you're caught between these weird things. On the one hand, you might have like a really knowledgeable SEO that's also doing this like creator side thing who wants to use the tools but doesn't have the money on their personal side, right? Or you have the creator side where it's like they're so focused on, or small business side even, I'm using those interchangeable. They're so focused on the content creation, if they're focused on digital marketing at all, that is it easier to buy a tool and start that as a capability, or do you just outsource it? Right? Like, is it easier to find an SEO agency to outsource that activity? Because, as we've talked about before, and I think this is true in a lot of enterprise organizations as well. Do I spend the money to have this capability in-house, right? Which requires people and startup time and having somebody knowledgeable enough to bring everything together. Or do I just say, hey, we're pushing towards this priority, go to this this agency to do the work, they can pay for the subscription and whatever else, right? That middle ground is lacking, but I think it's more of the strategic problem too, where it's like either you're doing some things really, really well enough to get to the point where SEO becomes an optimization piece, right? I'm already going to take some stuff and polish it really well.
Sure.
Or you're developing the capability to the point where, if you're at the enterprise level, okay, now I have 70,000 SKUs across 7 countries. Okay, now I need a team, and that's a totally different thing, right? With because now you're talking multiple site maps and all that, super hard technical stuff. One other thought that immediately jumped out of my mind, and then maybe we can keep bouncing ideas off each other. The big thing for me with the crawler tools that I've had experience with in the past, or whatever else, is that the messaging that the crawler tool tends to reinforce are the internal narratives of the organization.
Tell me more. What do you mean?
So you talk about the weird structures.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The weird structures are probably there because of the give and take of launching the platform, or, sure, somebody wasn't didn't want to do the budget arguments, to get that extra tool that would have solved that IA issue, or the content gallery issue, or whatever else, right? So that you get those weird nuances because people only have so much emotional capacity for negotiating, right?
It's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
But crawling is inherently an internal focused piece, right? Because you have your marketers focusing on the data that is on your owned media platforms. Sure. And then at best you're focused on the link building piece of it, where it's who's linking to me. How do I get more people linking to me? It's not audience focused, right?
Right. No, you're right.
So while it is absolutely important to polish, the experience that you have for the customers that you have, crawling and that whole section of SEO is not a part of that kind of growth marketing piece unless you do all of that polishing, right? To make the experience better, you'll get that marginal gains. But addressing a new audience, it doesn't necessarily, help you there. Now, I know a lot of people will be like, whoa, you have all the data and blah, 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 blah. But
yeah. But no, you've got a really good point there. So I've always seen technical SEO as being one of these things of, if the page isn't crawlable, if the page doesn't load, who cares how nice the content is?
Right.
But those are kind of the table stakes level. And you're absolutely right that what it does is really gets into the minutia after that. So once you fix oh my gosh, we put a no index across our entire site and told Google not to index us. Well, that's a problem. You should remove that.
Right.
Or you've got broken pages all over the place. Well, yeah, obviously you need to fix that. But once you get past that, it does get down to that pretty quickly, gets it down to the minutia, gets really stuck in the weeds of,
right,
we're not playing the 80-20 rule anymore. Instead, we're just looking at squeezing out the couple percent that we can. And I think that is might be a bit of a bold statement, but I always think that is true of technical SEO is really when you're looking at organic traffic growth, after you fix those basic things, technical SEO gives you a single digit increase in organic traffic, like on an annual basis. You really want that double digit, that triple digit growth. You're looking at content. You're looking at building out something new on the site. You're looking at trying a new endeavor, maybe a different business model even, or a different subscription model, or, advertising method, something like that. That's really going to start bringing in a new set of customers, maybe a new market segment, something like that will really kind of change things up. But I really resonate. That's a really interesting thought, Dave. And I really resonate with that because there's that same piece I've always had a problem with, rank tracking tools. I think for the most part, they're kind of BS. Because the problem that they start with is, what do you want to track?
Right.
And that is a bad starting place because I've never seen a company not start with our own brand name, which of course we rank for. We invented the word or the phrase.
Right.
Our own product names, which of course we rank for. We invented them when we created those phrases and those names. I mean, it's such a tiny little pinpoint of a flashlight in a giant dark room, and you're saying, I'm only going to focus on what the flashlight's happens to be focused on right now, and I'm going to forget about the entire dark room that's full of scary monsters because it's too much. I'm just going to focus on what I can see, and it looks nice, so that looks good.
Right.
That's not helpful, and that's not good for marketers to get focused and so stuck on, oh my gosh, our average ranking dropped by an average position of 1 or something on this particular keyword. It's like, okay, but how many sales did you get? How many conversions did you get? How many website signups, webinar signups, email signups did you get?
Right.
We're not tracking those. We're not thinking about those. Well, then it doesn't matter. I mean, your rank tracking doesn't matter at all. You have to get to that next level. And I think you make a really good point about the backlinks, especially when we start talking about competitor sets, because that's another thing that most crawler tools, you're just focused on your site. You're not crawling your competitors. And it's not giving you a summary of the changes of, Honeywell did, or GE did this last week, or Target or Walmart or Amazon did this last week. And it says, hey, by the way, they're trying something new. Here's an early look before it hits you.
Yeah. And this is one of the problems, I think, with crawling. Well, okay. So a couple thoughts. These are disjointed, but I swear they'll come together.
Okay. I'm patient. Go for it.
You talk about the pricing model, right? You will not be able to convince your bosses, your managers, your, whatever, to pay the money to crawl your competitor sites. Yeah, right? Even though it is public data, to have a reoccurring crawl,
expensive.
It's super expensive. So that's just not feasible unless you're going to do the one-off research study, right?
And again, you're talking at that enterprise scale when they probably have a large catalog like a Walmart and Amazon. Yeah, right. The cost is really, really high.
Right. So that's just a kind of a non-starter. So you have to go in there. Secondly, at least my mind immediately goes to anybody who's in-house, right? And as much as I love our agency friends, one of the reasons that I went in-house was to get the technical SEO expertise because it became clear that none of my clients were going to give me access to the back end and the systems that you need for the crawling.
Yeah.
Right. So to be able to have that experience and to go in and say, hey, let's test out this more technical side. You have to go in-house for that. Just because of, proprietary data and different tools and whatever else, right? You don't want a lot of that, getting out. So, that's where, in my mind, if you're going to sell crawling as a capability or as a tool set, I think the crawling piece of it, to your point with the webinars, crawling in that instance could be a really good case for conversion rate optimization, right? Because if you're bringing in, okay, the page loads at 2 seconds, and if we get it to 1 second, we'll increase the thing there because we're reducing the friction for the decision making, right?
Yeah.
And if you're at that level of conversation within your organization, hats off to you, because so many people are struggling to get to that point, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
The in regards to the reinforcing the internal marketing piece of it, if you are able to have a crawling tool and talking to the businesses, the problem with the crawling data is when you go to the business and they say, okay, here's the priority portfolio, here's what we want to do within this particular thing, and then you come back at them with, well, I decreased 40,000 server errors. They're gonna be like, no, this is a marketing meeting, this isn't IT. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it does make a good soundbite, but you got a good point that the things that they're really focused on, the big numbers on the wall, are not server errors.
Right.
It's signups, MQLs, something like that.
Right. And as SEOs, you have to straddle that line, right, between the IT stakeholders and the marketing stakeholders. Especially in, the older traditional ones where they're still separate things, right? If you have a CMO who's also a CTO, that's a pretty good organization to be in. But if they're still separate, then you're going to have those conversations and you're going to have to code switch between the two of them, right? Because you're going to have to talk a very different game to both of them.
That's true. That's definitely true. Yeah, I always think there's tool gaps always. I mean, I talk about tools probably pretty frequently, but I've seen a lot of them kind of get created. I've tried to make my own even. I've kind of hacked together some using like Google Data Studio plus Screaming Frog data and plus other tools or something like that. Right. And I've hired developers to create ones for myself, different endeavors, basically kind of down that line. And I think there's always gaps, basically, because an SEO has a tool set.
Right.
There's never really a complete all-in-one SEO tool. And that's usually the problem, is you need to take this knowledge from tool 1 and get into tool 2 to tool 3 and really combine it together. And then you really have something that's actionable.
Right.
And if you are just piecemealing it out, I mean, you can look at a number 3 different ways and say, well, it's not high enough. It's not low enough. Maybe it's steady enough. I mean, you can always kind of pick apart any tool, any data point, and make an action item out of it. But it's not the ones that matter.
Right.
So I always think that's partially just the SEO job. But I think there's also always gaps between those different ones too, because are you targeting the right terms? Are you going after the right entities? Are you talking about the right sites? Are you trying for things that honestly the only people ever searching for are looking for, image, and that has nothing to do with your product. So you're throwing up blog posts and really give it a quick search, and you'll start to realize that you have the wrong format of content. And there's tools that don't even tell you that piece, and you start going down the wrong rabbit hole, basically.
Right.
Yeah, there's gaps all over. I don't know. I guess I really haven't seen. I've seen a lot of development, and I've seen a lot of kind of acquisitions, especially in the recent years. So I'm definitely optimistic that these tools are going to really show a lot of value to different teams. And you're right with the CMO, CTO piece of, depending on the organization, they're going to be interested in this data set or this data set. It could be, they really want to know, what's the seasonality that nobody ever talked about of our business, because we're able to see that through Google Search Console data saying that, or, just keyword data, basic monthly volumes, and say, we've got a seasonality peak that always comes in spring. Don't know if you guys are aware of that, but maybe we should try to branch out a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, there's gaps there, but I think the tools are really coming pretty fast. And as they start to combine together and people have that more holistic view, then it will get interesting.
Right.
Which is, if you're okay with transitioning, I got another holistic view question for you after this.
All right.
Go for it.
Well, just a thought that came to mind while you were talking. The difference between what I've seen thus far, those companies that are specifically targeting the enterprise market segment don't have to worry so much about integration. Like they integrate with the big things, right? Like,
Yeah, that's
we
true.
export to Excel. Yay.
Sure.
That should just be a thing,
Yeah, right.
no matter
Right.
what tool you're building, right?
Yeah.
Or we pull in from Search Console. Great, because that's 95% of the internet, right?
Yeah.
Where I think there's a lot of opportunity within the enterprise segment of the market is the integrations that the smaller companies are going after, or the tools that are targeting the smaller businesses, or the agencies that have to deal with a ton of different tools, right? Like being able to have that workflow between all of the different apps would be outstanding. Now, it is a really hard problem to solve, where it's okay, if we're going to go after this particular enterprise segment, what are the tools that everybody's using? You can make some estimations on a lot of it, but if you look at the MarTech stack, what's that I think Scott Brinker's organization that always releases the
or the MarTech map.
Yeah. I mean, that is a ridiculous map every year of just how many apps and tools there are. So it would be really hard to choose a chunk of them to then say, okay, this is what we're going to, play with. But the capabilities that you can get even as an individual, like, offline, I was talking about how getting, my to-do list app to talk to my calendar app to then automatically update each other so that I can track progress on my my projects and my content calendar and everything else is outstanding, right? Because otherwise it's 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. So being able to get that at scale is definitely that big gap, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I kind of see it as different workflows. It's kind of mentioned like the small business and the creator aspect. I think the only thing useful out of Screaming Frog would be basically like an insights tab saying like, I don't have time for this. I'm supposed to do 5 other jobs and wear 10 other hats. Give me the top 5 things I need to care about. And after that, honestly, I don't have time for it. I don't care about the alt tags that much unless I'm in a market that really matters towards that usage. Just give me the top things. Like, is one of my pages broken? Just tell me that. And then from an agency standpoint, you're more technically minded, so you want more of the details. But you're right, with the workflow aspect, it gets really complex where you have multiple tools. You're trying to pull it all together. Honestly, there's always a presentation like breathing down your neck that you're trying to pull together and scramble for, but you're also trying to quickly get the insights you need for this client versus this client and quickly remember, okay, like 26 clients, what does this guy have a problem with again? Oh yeah, this one. Or what was the major issue with this site again? And this one.
Right.
And then you got a really good point that at an enterprise level, you start to have those full-timers who are focused on very narrow aspects in comparison to those other ones. You got the small business owner who's got 10 different hats. In an enterprise, one of those is split into 5 different people's jobs. And, they really start to get into those fine details, which those enterprise tools, you're right, kind of go after that right now. So it fits.
Well, and I've said, transitioning from the agency side and the small business side into the in-house, enterprise side, my biggest takeaway, especially as somebody who has a background in content marketing and making those recommendations across the spectrum, if you are tackling, or if you're using the BERT model for, or the EAT, sorry. I'll hand in my SEO card here.
Yeah, they recently had another letter system. Now the EAT.
Yeah. So let's just assume that is how the world works as a digital marketer.
Okay.
Angry comments aside here, flooding in as people are listening to this. Uh, the biggest thing that I realized was, that expertise piece, right? And the trust of the expertise, within the model is huge, right? Like going from the small business consultant, medium-sized business consultant, where it's like you need to be seen as the expert in your field.
Yep.
Right. The way that we do this is blah, 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 blah. That was a whole year-long initiative, maybe 2 years. If you really wanted to do it well, like you had to be all in on being seen as the expert. Whereas going into the enterprise side, it's like, wow, I can get away with a lot of sins and still do amazingly well. Just because of the authority of the domain and how many sites are linking to it, and the fact that we've been around forever and ever and a day. Yeah. You have to catch yourself going, wait, am I about to be a lazy marketer and just launch something that I know is not awesome, but I know it will rank well? Yeah, I probably am.
Yeah, it can encourage that complacency. Definitely can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, depending on the industry you're in, though, you're gonna have to fight for it. And the market that you're going in, right? I mean, that health and wealth piece of it, like you're gonna have to do everything really, really well, and you can't necessarily afford some screw ups, just because of the importance of getting factually correct content out there and having that reputation, right?
It takes the old school, like pure white hat versus kind of the gray and black side of it, where this is and I always see those best translated really in kind of financial terms of, are you day trading, which is your black hat because you're burning domains daily or hourly or minutely, or are you doing long-term investments, which is slow, it's steady, but you also don't want to rock the boat too much. And that's when it gets to the enterprise scale, you're absolutely pure stuck in the white hat world of, we got to do everything by the book because we can't screw this up. And if we screw this up, it's a big deal, but it's a slow path.
And that analogy is a really good one because, whenever you're in a presentation and you see all of that data, right, to your point with the keyword tracking, the first thing you have to do is couch it by saying, okay, this end of the graph is the last, it's daily information for the last 3 weeks. And then this side of the graph and it's already too hard. Yeah. Right. Because here's the trend lines and then here's the day trading. And you're like, no, just give me the average data so that we can talk about, hey, I'm hitting my percentage, let me keep my job kind of a thing. And I mean, you have to talk about the long-term trends because especially with the way tastes are changing as quickly as they are, like you stand for something and you just, you follow that path. Right. And that was one of the things when I was doing crisis communications, back in the day. It takes years to build the reputation and it takes one thing to completely destroy it, instantly. So, I mean, those are considerations, even on the technical side. You might not have to deal with the angry mob, that's tweeting at you, if you're on the technical side, but, you're part of the problem,
I got a little bit of a hot take, but I'm curious on your opinion on this, just to spice it up just a little bit.
Okay.
So Airbnb, massive in their market of the kind of vacation rental, there's even now small companies are basically starting to buy up properties even to just put them on rentals for Airbnb. Right. But there really isn't a good second player in the market. There's VRBO in the US market. There's a couple others, especially once you get into Europe, but Airbnb is pretty much a mammoth currently. Right. They cut their performance marketing team and basically all of it. And they cut it and they talked about it basically on an earnings call. And then they basically cut the team. And then they continue to say, this was a great move for us because we used to be spending millions and now we're not. We've been able to smack it down like crazy in terms of our marketing cost. Instead, we're just going to keep our brand advertising up You'll still see some paid search ads with that, but we're going to cut all performance. And my thought with that is you are hanging too much of a hat on brand, which that crisis communication, your experience there, that's the thing that smacks me around, is just like, you are one mistake away from just tanking a brand. I mean, for those who don't know of Airbnb, or those who are looking to make some extra money because they're in that market, or those who are wondering how they can, make use of the second home that they have because they're in that market, you have still some performance marketing options basically with those people. But you have that brand mistake and you've now killed the brand side of things. But what's your take with that? I think my point is that I think Airbnb is in a very unique situation where that worked out well for them. But I would say the vast majority of companies out there, that would be a terrible idea.
Yeah, well, because brand is really you're only as good as your last project, right? I mean, that is the thing with that. However,
your latest scandal.
Right. Yeah. Man, this is where having Ruthi really balances us out. Because she's going to listen to this and just be like, why are you so dark?
Pessimistic about brands. You think there's always going to be a problem. Yeah. Overall, yeah.
Well, are human beings running the company? Then yes. Yeah.
Man, if we start talking about old Muskie, I mean, it's going to change.
No thanks. I need to keep nice things on this show.
Okay.
No, so specifically the Airbnb piece. This is where, as SEOs or as marketers, you absolutely have to pay attention to what the financial people are doing and what the CEOs are doing within the financial markets, right? Like, because, at that point, your boss really is the shareholders and what the market feels about you, right? And I know, having gone to any number of conferences where you hear the side conversations or the presenters, and as marketers talking to marketing, and that's fine up to a point, right? But the results are for who? And I don't want to get into the pros and cons of private versus public on this particular show. I have some.
Well, basically, you're saying is to kind of better fit towards the shareholder market or to the shareholders. That's a fine decision, basically, because that's what the shareholders want.
I wouldn't put it that simply. No.
Okay.
So the nuance about this, I think Rand Fishkin had a fantastic presentation on shareholders and SEO and why ads always gets all the budget versus SEO. Okay. I'll try to find a public link and put in the show notes here. But yep. I mean, essentially, generally, I'm paraphrasing, right? It is easier to set a duffel bag of cash on fire with ads and say, you gave me 10,000, I brought you back 12,000, because then the shareholders will be able to say, yeah, they're growing. They brought in X number of percent, sure, into the margin, and cash flows going on, and blah, 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 blah. Whereas if you're talking about enterprise crawling, now you're talking about plumbing, and nobody cares about plumbing until there's a backup and you're sitting there going, crap, 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 crap. Right?
Yeah, that's generally true. Same thing with enterprise SEO, not until everything's tanking and why are we wiped off the face of Google and my gosh, everything's on fire.
Yeah, I did a search and we didn't show up in the first page.
Oh my gosh. Or the CEO Googled us while he was on vacation and we didn't show up for X term Y.
Exactly. Yeah, X or Y priority. Yeah, let's not go into that PTSD bag. But I think if you were to, and I haven't done this, but it might be an interesting experiment. If you go into the shareholder meeting notes or the quarterly reports, what are the higher ups saying for the Airbnb piece? Are they saying that we've grown the company to a high enough point that we don't need to differentiate ourselves enough, or as much as we used to, right?
Sure.
Because we
What was the
brought
reasoning
ourselves
behind
to
it?
this. We're at a dominant position in the market,
Yeah,
so we don't necessarily need to focus on growth as much as we did. We need to focus on position and retention, essentially.
yeah.
Right? Like
Good cash
I've had
savings,
good
fixing costs.
experiences with VRBO and
Yeah, so
Verbo, or however it is. Is it altogether better than Airbnb? No. I think my biggest pain points between the two of them are the user experience in the apps. I tend to like how one categorizes things and presents collections better than the other, right?
yeah.
But as a single user for it, that's not enough for them to
Yeah.
change,
Plus, it's a
what they're
very
doing.
experiential product
Mm-hmm.
where the need for what kind of accommodation you're looking for, depending on the type of location you're in. If you're at a beach house, and my gosh, it was so easy to come in off and have, get rid of all the sand and stuff with their outdoor shower or something.
Right.
And that was super convenient. Or they had a grill, which was amazing that one night when we all bought some stuff from the local grocery store and grilled it. It was so nice. Or that condo in downtown X country or X city was so convenient with their underground parking, which is impossible to find parking in that particular city. I mean,
Right.
it's very experiential to the point where, it really gets into exactly how you felt about that experience at that time with that usage, that mentality.
Right.
Were you stressed out that entire vacation? Well, it was a horrible vacation and everything about it becomes kind of tainted.
Yeah, I have a family with little kids. Of course, there was stress on the vacation. That's just.
I heard the phrase that if it's with your kids, it's not a vacation.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's a trip. Yeah. It's not a vacation. If it's without your kids, then it's a vacation.
God forbid it's with the in-laws. That's
called an intervention. That's a little different.
Yeah. No, I think my experience this last summer, we went to San Diego. We did a trip, and it was a fantastic trip. Would I hold the platform responsible for anything that happened? No, because I'm immediately going, this is somebody's house. This is somebody else's property, right?
Yeah.
And
the host was.
Yeah, luckily, the host was awesome. We ran into an issue because, trying to fit a 4Runner into a, tiny garage. That's a unique issue to the area, and, things happen, but we were able to work it out. The host was great. I like to think we're reasonable people, but that's for other people to say about us. But I do think, when you look at, especially a lot of these startups that are starting to get, they're teenagers, right? They're starting to grow beards. Some of them are going to be at the dominant position within the market, and then the priorities will have to change in order to keep things and the shareholders happy. And that's just part of the natural life cycle of any organization, right? We got so caught up in the narrative of, grow and small startups need to just grow, unicorns. Well, at some point, is that a unicorn or is that a horse with a party hat?
Yeah, I was about to say, speaking of Rand Fishkin, I would really recommend his book, Lost and Founder.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that talked, and including some of the blog posts that he had kind of on his departure out of Moz into SparkToro, kind of between there, you can see the two different blogs and the posts and the various kind of kind of almost counter posts that go on in Moz as well. But
Mm-hmm.
really talked a lot about that, about, the growth stage, that kind of plateauing stage, and is the right people right for that company at those certain points in time? When does that leadership change has to happen, and how much of a hangover does it happen? Basically, when they hang on too long and you get that kind of a hangover effect. And then kind of those different issues that kind of prop up during those times. But you're right, again, with that narrative changes as those businesses mature past the 10-year mark, past the 15-year mark. I mean, they start to, competition pops up as well, because they were the disruptor originally, but then Uber messed up with their PR scandals, and then Lyft was able to kind of get a boost, and Lyft was second in the market, and Uber was the one hitting against all the legal challenges.
Mm-hmm.
They broke ground. Lyft got to walk in, and yes, I would say Lyft also had a lot of challenges as well. I mean, both of them are difficult, and difficult spot, difficult market, and now very competitive market as well. But things have to change, and and the models have to change, and the marketing behind it has to change along with it.
Right. Because, the model with Airbnb and that whole concept, that was a new concept, right? Because growing up, what are you told? Don't talk to strangers. Don't mess with strangers' things. And now all of a sudden it's go spend a week in a stranger's house.
Yep. Or
I don't know.
Never get into a stranger's car. Unless you had an app open and you asked for that vehicle. And then you can get into a stranger's car. That's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, they had to not only get people willing to put up their house or, vacation house or whatever else as a potential property.
Right.
They also have to get people interested in doing that.
Right.
And going into that. So now that that's become a very familiar thing to a large segment of the population, well, now they don't have to advertise so much. You don't have to convince people to be comfortable with this, proposition anymore, because, the biggest thing with those platforms is that they don't own anything. They don't own the products that they're selling.
Right.
Right. So, if they all of a sudden started having, their own properties, well, then how are they going to go fight against the hotels that are saying, wait a second, why are they not, regulated under the same things as we are with that, because they have their own experiences. Yeah. Well, essentially, I mean, you're providing the same service, but you're doing it in the same way, but the regulations haven't caught up the same way. And, now what? Right.
That's always the case, especially with the regulations. I always have this analogy whenever I think of going back to the thing that was a political statement that turned into a meme about the internet as a series of tubes, or as the internet as a series of pipes, depending on your actual recollection of the true quote. Was always that the laws are looking at each other like we're throwing rocks at each other, but really we're like shooting lasers from space. It's always this gigantic lag time when we finally get to this regulation point. But it probably is around that same time frame where you're talking 10, 15 years in, when you're starting to see, federal laws come in, which are affecting not just, local cities banning Uber, or local states trying to, fight against Airbnb or something like that, if there was that sort of a case. But instead you start to see that national level kind of attention that usually kind of comes in around that time.
Right. And to your point, we've seen a number of businesses that, they looked at the existing laws and essentially said, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and break those, and that'll just be the tax of, doing business. And, we'll just earmark scooters. Yeah, we're just going to earmark a portion of our annual budget to deal with these fines, but eventually we'll get critical mass. That's the belief.
The public will want it.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with like the Lime scooters, electric scooters that used to basically be literally dumped off in the back like a pickup truck all over a city, and cities like you're littering, where local users are making use of it, but then other people are stepping around them and wondering, like, what heck is with all these things laying around all over the place? Or Uber coming into cities who haven't allowed them quite yet.
Right. Well, and the trade-offs of parking in the city versus the rows of bikes,
Right.
for rent, right? Like,
Yeah.
um,
And our cities are
yeah,
behind that where they have their own. Yeah. I think
yeah.
actually one of the next ones, just a little point on that. It was last time I was looking at a vacation. I got a lot of ads for car sharing. And it
Mm,
was instead of doing, Hertz rental or whatever kind of the major rental companies that, even have a nice little shuttle bus straight from the airport where you have somebody instead locally drop off the car at the airport, or you take a Uber or cab to their place and then you pick up their car for the
hmm.
period of time. And it was way cheaper. I didn't
Right.
do it because I wasn't comfortable with it yet, which I think it's going to be that next kind of stage of, it's fine to use someone else's house, it's fine to use someone else's car, but and and I'm nervous about driving a friend's car. Like, yeah.
Yeah, there is that question of liability, right? Because if you're
Yeah.
borrowing the friend's car and you get into an accident, I
Oh,
mean, there's sort of there's a more familiar,
sure. More
insurance
forgiving.
process. Yeah.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, it goes back to the need, right? Like when I
Yeah.
remember when the first kind of wave of COVID broke, and then all of a sudden everybody's like, "Screw it, I'm traveling, I'm getting out of the house."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You saw all these people going to Hawaii, and then there were no cars available in Hawaii, and you can't just ship more
Right.
cars to Hawaii, in a decent amount of time. So at that point, it is, okay, let's take advantage
Yes.
of the blip in the
Yeah.
market right now, right?
Yeah.
But to that point, the problem, my problem with the Airbnbs and the renting other people's stuff is, at what point do they not have what they need to go with their day, right? If you don't have a car and you don't have a house because you're going back to your friend's house to sleep on the couch so you can make some money to pay for the rent, like, at what
Where is
point
it?
do you just need more money
Yeah.
through your
There's the thing
main,
about
thing?
Ecolab, who makes a lot of soap products and hotel detergents as well as like
Right.
laundry detergents and stuff like that. They were getting a lot of random phone calls from not hotel chains, but individuals because they were having problems with things like lice and other issues that hotels deal with on a daily basis and are used to dealing with. But now these are Airbnb hosts who have realized that now they have a infestation or a problem, and what do they do about it? So they called the manufacturer, and the manufacturer's like, "Who on earth are you? Why are you calling us? We're not
Yeah.
used to dealing with that market segment." So it opened up, I'm sure, a new market for them if they were able to take advantage of it. But it also becomes that line of, also when it gets to the point of, once we reach a certain level of maturity, and you're starting to see that with small businesses who are buying up a number of vacation properties and just using them purely as Airbnb, or people seeing it as a
Right.
second source of income and building properties, long-term investment there.
Well,
That
to
starts to
jump in,
change. Yeah.
yeah. And to jump in with a thought, to the first topic of our conversation with the enterprise crawling piece,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is underutilized with the crawling piece is with M&A. I don't think marketers are involved enough with M&A, to be honest.
Yeah. 100% agreed. It's a
Especially
mess.
with the larger companies,
Yeah.
where it's largely seen as either a portfolio extension, or you're buying the capabilities, or you get the acqui-hire kind of thing, instead of
Sure.
looking at digital portfolios, right? Like, I think there's a lot of the opportunity there for, if you are looking to vet some companies, maybe making the pitch of, hey, you know what, if we're going to go look at this potential thing, or this potential site, or this blogger who's got the audience that we want to address, crawling those potential targets to see, as you transition those assets to your organization, what kind of headaches are you going to have, right? I mean,
Yeah.
being a part of some of those things before, having a tool that you can leverage to look into that and say, ooh, okay, this is actually being hosted on, some third party thing. And, do we have the necessary contracts migrate this over, or God forbid you didn't negotiate the things properly and you don't have access to that IP, even though that it's part of that company, right?
Yeah. Like IP address, not intellectual property, but yeah.
No, both.
IP. Yeah.
Both.
Oh, sure.
I mean, that's the thing. You got to remember what the contracts were negotiated, and God forbid, somebody wasn't reading everything.
Yeah, I think that's largely, I mean, I know you've had honestly, more experience with it than I have, where you're kind of dealing with the post-acquisition of even very large brands buying other very large brands and trying to intake that company.
Right.
I've been a part of some of those in some ways, but never as close as you are. But yeah, I see that consistently as largely missing, is whenever you're kind of seeing it or hearing it from the IT side or from the marketing side, they always seem to be left in the dark. And it's like an afterthought that we'll sign the paperwork, we'll buy the rights, we'll buy the financial aspect of it. We're looking at those levels, but we're not looking at what's the cost of transitioning this business into ours. How we on earth are actually going to combine these two brands together.
Right.
Like that seems to be a pretty major question that just seems to be missed. Like I get it that the books look great, but my gosh, do the brands make any sense, or the product portfolios make any sense? Like to the customer base. I was a part of a reverse acquisition once, which was, it was results pretty quick into a whole bunch of layoffs. It was financially looked like a fantastic deal, tax savings, a lot of things. Basically, with a reverse acquisition, kind of you get that hope that you have that. But my gosh, the product lines did not line up, and the customer set did not line up, and the brands, therefore, even though they were technically in the same industry category, they were not really sister brands or close enough to really be purchasing one another and trying to integrate in a smooth fashion. It was a disaster. I mean, teams got laid off, people left, champions left. That's the reason I left the company basically shortly after.
The statistics on acquisitions are not good yet. It's an easy way to communicate growth, right? Talking about the business life cycle piece, right? Yeah. Like you want to talk about, organic growth, or, you either buy it or build it, right? So what's going to be easier? Yeah. I think the, when you talk about the huge brands buying another huge brand and trying to build those in, you go and you look at what are the case studies for website migrations, right? Because especially coming up in the SEO space, those are always the favorite case studies, because you always see the crash and burn examples, right? Everything was de-indexed because we hit the wrong button, and whatever. That was one site, one product line, one whatever.
Right.
Now let's talk about one brand with 100,000 SKUs in 20 languages and 18 domains or whatever it is. Yeah. And then, now you can't screw up any of them. Go.
Yeah. I always think of the acquisition strategy kind of like that, as like the old medieval/barbarian method of growth. Like, we don't have enough money to pay for our own food for our own people. We should probably just take over our neighbor because I hear they have money. And now we have 2 places that we need to feed. Take over the third. I think they have money. And it's like, my gosh, that's going to eventually catch up with you and crash and burn. Yeah, it looks fantastic at the beginning. And yes, you seem to be the winner of the battles, but man, you're going to get bitten in the butt. You always know it. History is going to come after you at some point. I mean, it's, that generation might do okay, especially medieval generations. And then after that very 20-year, 5-year, 2-year period, it's all over. I mean, it just crashes and burns. You think of giant empires doing the same thing. Giant collaboration companies seem to somehow get that same mentality that we can buy it and that we don't have to build it, but you always have to buy it, and then you have to build that into your company. You end up doing both costs in some way. Maybe you took them out of the market. Maybe you're able to capture some of their customers because some will leave, but you still have those costs. I mean, those costs still pick up. And I think that's, again, gets largely missed, where you get this one-time acquisition, but it's not one-time acquisition. It's acquisition and then cost and cost and cost as you rebuild their imagery. You buy the rights to their, whatever, their copyrighted images and videos. And you start to realize that, my gosh, they've got 20 subdomains that nobody even knew about. And what are we going to do with those? And the cost of those meetings even are expensive.
Right.
There's always cost.
Right. Although that, I mean, it is a necessary thing, right? I mean, that's a necessary part of business, and it's
at some point
you're not gonna stop doing that, especially when we talk about the tool stack, right? I mean, that's kind of the perfect case study. At the bottom, you're gonna have all this churn. You're gonna have all of these companies you're starting, failing, selling out, selling in, whatever else, right? Partnering, and it's an interesting piece to watch. But again, it is the what are you focusing on, and what are you trying to do, right? Because I've even said this, even as an SEO or a content marketer, when you come to me as a strategy with questions about a strategy, I'm just as likely to tell you not to do the tactics associated with my job as I am to use the ones, right? Because it is what's going to be the best case scenario for you, given the goals and whatever else you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's my thing with ads. I mean, ads are a necessary thing. They can do some wonderful things for an organization. But once you get the lazy marketer, right? Or we're just going to let the robots do all of the bidding and all of the ad copy and all of the everything.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You know what? Just light that table of cash on fire.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. Just do it.
Every single account I've ever taken over, I've been able to improve upon. And I don't think it's because I'm some rock star paid search, display advertising advertiser. I don't think that's the case. I think I'm probably pretty okay at it. But what I end up seeing over and over again is just that same laziness. And it's really easy to do better than somebody who didn't care at all. I improved, which means I didn't bid on things that made absolutely no sense. And I improved the keywords, which were, my gosh, broad match everything. Really? Really? We're going to broad match everything.
Well, that's kind of how I feel. And maybe we'll do a full episode on this next statement. But in typical Dave fashion, I'm going to throw a bomb at the very last, piece of it.
Love it. Go for it.
The broad match piece, that is exactly how I feel most people are going to use the generative AI. As much as people are saying, don't do it, leverage it to do the nice things.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're talking human nature here. What you're going to do is you're going to take the broad match keywords and the topic clusters. You're going to throw everything against the wall with the AI to see what sticks, so that maybe you can rank for a while on the topic while you figure out what resonates with your audience, because God forbid you actually talk to your audience, right? And understand what they need, right? Because it's just easier to produce content and say, look, I did a thing. So I think that deserves probably an episode.
Dude, I have a lot of thoughts on that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Because you're right, because that is human nature. You're always looking for the get rich quick, the shortcut, my gosh, where's that easy button? Bring that into my life somehow.
Right.
And that actually might spur content marketing as like this lauded expertise.
Right.
Because you're finally able to break past what is the baseline. The baseline will be this AI written copy, which will be generic, dated. It's based on training data, so it's going to be what it is, what it is.
Right.
But then you'll finally be able to say, content marketing has this new holy grail, which is get above the baseline, get above the AI content, or revisit a site and rehash their content, because my gosh, it's a mess of somebody just doing keyword generation based AI blog post built, and goodness knows that's not going to be fantastic.
Right. And I mean, and we know this because we've been through enough SEO and content cycles to know that
Yeah,
the hot new thing will go up, people will do it, and
I
then
know.
there'll be some kind of tweak, and then it'll crash and burn. And then what stays? All of
Yeah,
the baseline, do the right thing, send the right,
yeah,
information, all that kind of stuff. The fundamentals of marketing and addressing an audience will stay the same, and they will
yep.
continue to work, but it's hard, right? And I think strategically too, I mean, with a lot of this technology and a lot of this stuff coming up here, it increases the importance of the brands to stand for something. It's not going to be good enough for the big organizations or the medium
Yeah.
organizations to be like, look, we're just a business. I don't care about these social issues. I don't, we just want to sell you a die cast.
That's going to be another episode. I swear, because we're going to talk through the movement of ESG, kind of how it's played through the market, but also in relation to that EAT now.
Yeah.
With the expertise, the authority, the trustworthiness, but also the experience, because that new E of how are we talking to our customers, in what way, in what fashion, are we doing it in a way that attracts them beyond the idea that, yes, we make, product X.
Right. Well, and to the point of, the conversations we've had even before we decided to start, recording our conversations for this podcast, who are we talking to? Why do you go to a particular, content creator or content platform? It's because, you might be sharing the same information as somebody else, but it's the way in which you engage with it. It's the way in which you present it that actually resonates with people. And that's why people stay. You might come for the information, but you stay because of how it resonates. Right. Okay, so in classic form, I do have to jump to something else, but in the last couple minutes here, let's try the newish format and recommend something cool. So, what in the last week has caught your eye that you want to say is something fun people should look into?
I'll share out. Oof. It's going to be stuck around ChatGPT. So sorry, but what I would actually be pushing is podcast that you turned me on to, This Old Marketing, and some of their episodes basically look at some of the descriptions whenever they start calling about basically ChatGPT. They've got some really good insights into basically how they feel about it and how it can be basically used, especially in a content way, where it can fit into marketing. And then recommending a second podcast, because why not two? It's called Making It, David Picciuto. And basically, I'm blanking on the two other guys who have actually probably have far larger YouTube followings. But David Picciuto in particular, just because he brings up an excellent point talking about use of AI-generated models and ideas and how it basically fits into creating physical goods. And all three of them are makers. They kind of make items, they make things, they have YouTube, followings and channels about it. And where they see that line is, and where they see, when is it stealing, when is it being inspired by, and when is it, scrolling through Pinterest, the same as basically getting inspiration off of that. It's a really different way to look at it. And I think it's a fantastic way from a marketer to really start to wrap your head completely around how AI can really affect us.
Right.
What about you, Dave?
Interesting. You talked about MarTech and, how you and I love to just, play around and try new things. I've been recently blown away by the tool called Descript. And I know I'm kind of late to the game with that. But if you are challenged to do more with less, I would highly recommend, looking into that. And, no affiliation with them at the time of this recording. So purely because I've played around with it and found it interesting.
Can you give a quick summary of what it does?
Yeah, so it's an audio video editor that also does the transcription fairly well. I've always gotten burned with the transcript, claims by a lot of these MarTech companies so far. They're just never quite as good as they say they would be. But this is probably the best that I've seen thus far. But then it also has a lot of useful tools of, repurposing your original content into other formats so that you can easily take one thing and then have, the YouTube Shorts version, TikTok version, or, Instagram, like different content types and capturing quotes. And it just makes it a lot easier than having to do that linear editing. And then I don't know what compelled me, but I recently rewatched some old films and, just as a general PSA, don't forget about the old good films like, Godfather or Dirty Harry, just as a fun, gratuitous action film, yeah, that's so that would be my recommendation. Don't even with all the fun new stuff, don't forget about some of the old classics and revisit those as to why they're awesome. Even if they are awesome for their time, right? So yeah, that's it for us this week. Thanks for hanging around. Like, subscribe, share. Let us know any episode ideas, comments, questions, anything overly negative, keep to yourself. Because the internet doesn't need any more negativity. No, but we'll take any feedback and welcome it for sure. Because, we enjoy these conversations and definitely want to find out what everybody else is thinking too. Because these are definitely things we're throwing around and mulling the questions on. So thank you and see you in the next episode. Take care.
Thanks all. Bye.